Paris, 1925. A businessman signs away 1,200,000 francs for a tower that isn't for sale. Cash changes hands. Off the books. An hour later, the seller's on a train out of the country. 6 months on, he comes back and tries to sell it again. The man calling himself Victor Lustig wasn't a diplomat. He wasn't even French. Not really. Prison records would later list his real name as Robert Miller, a runaway from a stone farmhouse in Bohemia, who taught himself 5 languages and a talent for other people's money. Some early biographers give him 3 other names entirely. He told people his father had been a respected small-town mayor. Prison paperwork tells a plainer story. They're poor peasants in a stone house. By 1925, he'd already sold a bridge in London to a tourist who didn't check the deed first. This is the story of a government official who never existed, and a national landmark he managed to sell twice. April 1925. Lustig meets his brother Emile and an old associate, a con man who went by Dapper Dan. The Paris papers were full of a real complaint that spring. The Eiffel Tower was rusting, expensive to maintain, and technically only ever meant to stand for 20 years in the first place. City officials were seriously debating whether to tear it down and sell it for scrap. Lustig read the same headlines as everyone else in Paris. He just saw an opening where they saw a budget problem. He didn't pose as a buyer, or a broker, or a con man looking for a mark. He posed as the government itself. Specifically, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Post and Telegraphs. In 1920s France, a ministry title wasn't just impressive, it was close to unquestionable. To make the role real, he needed real paper. His partner had been carrying on an affair with a young clerk inside the Ministry of Commerce. Through her, he got into the archive room and walked out with genuine government letterhead, stamped, sealed, and completely authentic. On April 30th, 6 of Paris's biggest scrap metal dealers each received a letter, marked strictly confidential, personal, written on paper that couldn't be faked. Because it wasn't. They were summoned to a private room in the basement of the Hotel de Crillon, the most expensive hotel in the city, and made to sign a confidentiality agreement before anyone explained why they'd been called there at all. Inside, Lustig played the reluctant bureaucrat, burdened with an unpleasant national secret. His partner played the ministry's engineer. Tonnage estimates: 7,000 tons of iron. A full demolition plan on official-looking charts. Then came the tour. Rented limousines. A private inspection of the tower itself. At the gate, Lustig quietly tipped the guards to wave his party straight through. No questions. It was a small thing. A folded bill, a nod, a shortcut past the line. It told 6 wealthy men everything they needed to believe. This man actually ran the tower. Sealed bids came in. One dealer had already been chosen, before the bidding even started. André Poisson, no money in an old city. Ambitious, and according to people who know him, still chasing a kind of respect Paris's oldest families had never once offered him. Lustig didn't sell the tower to just anyone. He sold it to the one man in the room who needed to believe it more than he needed to check it. Here's exactly how the rest of it worked. Lustig didn't need Poisson to trust the government. He needed Poisson to trust him, specifically as a corrupt version of it. In a private meeting, Lustig let something slip. His government salary was small, he said, His children went to a school that used to be a slaughterhouse. He wasn't proud of it. But a man has needs. It was a request for a bribe, dressed up as a confession, and it worked exactly backward from how you'd expect. An honest official, quietly selling national property, alone, off the books. That's suspicious. A greedy one, angling for a payoff on the side. That's just how the world works. Poisson didn't just believe the con, he believed it, because the man running it seemed dishonest in precisely the right way. Poisson paid the bribe. He paid the deposit, in cash, by hand. Exactly how much is disputed. Some sources say a flat 70,000 francs. Others a full 1.2 million franc contract with the bribe stacked on top. Either way, it emptied a fortune into a stranger's pocket. In return, Poisson received a 2-page transfer document, stamped with forged ministry seals, worth precisely nothing. Within the hour, Lustig and his partners were on a train, headed for Vienna. Here's what should have ended the story right there. A furious victim, a police report, an international manhunt. None of that happened. Poisson never said a word. He'd committed a crime of his own. Bribing a government official carried serious penalties under French law, and going to the police meant admitting, in public, that he'd hated a fortune to a stranger for a tower he'd never actually owned. Ruin, either way, he'd picked the quiet kind. Lustig waited in Vienna for headlines that never came. Then, he made the mistake every repeat offender eventually makes. He went back to Paris 6 months later and tried to sell the same tower to a second group of dealers. What he didn't know yet, this mark wouldn't fold as easily. This one wasn't a nervous newcomer chasing respect. He was an old hand, a man who'd done real business with the government for years and knew exactly what that business was supposed to look like. When Lustig, rushed now and increasingly nervous about being recognized, hinted at the same bribe, the man said no. He stayed inside the law, walked straight into the Ministry of Commerce, reported the whole meeting. By the time Lustig realized police were already moving, he was already running. Out of Paris and out of France. Before he could collect the rest of the money, he was never charged for it. Not in France, not anywhere. The only time French police caught up with him was 4 years later, in Montmartre. Arrested with a partner over forged bonds and fake identity papers. Nothing to do with towers at all. A short sentence, then deportation. Back to the one country that hadn't caught him yet. The United States. By the end of the decade, towers were old news, even to Lustig. He'd moved into something with better margins. Printing money. Real money. Near enough. With a chemist named William Watts and a partner named Tom Shaw, he built a counterfeiting operation in Nebraska, capable of turning out convincing $100 bills by the thousand. In 1930, he offered Al Capone a piece of a $50,000 stock deal. Took the money. 2 months later, handed it all back untouched, and told Capone the deal had fallen through. Capone, apparently moved by the rare sight of an honest man, gave him $5,000 as a reward. It may be the only recorded case of Al Capone paying someone for honesty. It was, of course, a lie. The counterfeiting ring ran for years. Federal agents picked him up once, in 1931, and let him go on bail. Nothing stuck. What finally ended it wasn't an investigation. It was jealousy. His girlfriend, Billie Mae, found out he'd been sleeping with his partner's wife. She didn't confront him. She called the Secret Service instead and gave them his address in New York. Lustig was arrested on May 10th, 1935. In his pocket, a key to a locker in the Times Square subway station. Inside the locker, agents found the printing plates. He wasn't finished yet. The night before his trial, he cut through the bars of his cell, tied his bed sheets into a rope, and climbed down the outside of the federal detention house. When people on the street below looked up, he pulled a rag from his pocket and started wiping the windows. Nobody stops to question a window washer. He lasted 27 days before Secret Service agents caught him stepping out of a car in Pittsburgh. "Well, boys," he told them, "here I am." At trial, his own partner, the chemist, agreed to testify against him. When Lustig heard the confession read aloud, he leaned over to his lawyer and said, quietly, "Hell, let's get it over with." On December 5th, 1935, federal judge John C. Knox gave him 20 years, 15 for the counterfeiting, 5 more stacked on top for the escape. He went to Alcatraz, inmate 300, under the name the prison had on file, Robert Miller. He spent a decade there, filing more than 1,000 medical complaints that mostly went nowhere, until his health had failed far enough that no one could keep ignoring it. He died at the Federal Prison Hospital in Springfield, Missouri, on March 11, 1947. Pneumonia, a brain abscess. His death certificate needed one line for his occupation. It reads, salesman.